I don't think you're as smart, but really been praying for you, and well, you got some changes coming up, so just know that. So, all right, this is a different living situation. So, all right. So good to see you're tuned in today. Well, be careful. Beautiful floor here. Can be slippery when it gets wet. I don't think it's slippery when it's not wet, but because it's new wax, we had one person take a tumble already. So just be careful. We outsourced it this time because of the fumes, smell, and difficulty. So well, that's good.
Yeah. So
let's see. What else do we need to tell you? All church camp is finishing up and going on. Jonathan's been very busy out there. And then we've got a little break here now for as far as special activities, I think. Good church picnic last Sunday. Beautiful day out at the lake. Didn't get quite warm enough for me to go swimming, but yeah, I think it was really cool. And there were prizes for bingo. I didn't know this. Karen won one. So that's where I put my new glasses. So what do you think? I ran them by the fashion police in my house. You know, I did one of these things where you order a bunch of frames. So they liked the clear ones. So I sent those back and went to Costco and found same thing. And Costco takes I don't have vision through my insurance, but Sandy does have a little bit for frames. So anyway, they took our insurance. So that was the place to go. So I got some new glasses. The other ones, you know, they just bend too easy. I like the lesser, like a big, anyway. So we tried these clear guys. I guess it's the style. That yeah. The whole congregation now, people. Oh. I actually like them better because there's a little bit more correction here. So far, so good. Okay. That. We have some really great text today. This is such a great narrative. It's amazing. I'm always amazed when I read it, and especially read it with a group of folks. So other than that, then, before we go to the text, you know, because you guys are here, you should be in the know about all cool things. We were very blessed in July with really generous offerings. Of course, I don't know who gives what, just remember that, but it was shared that I think some people, you know, they do the disperse from their investments or something so they give once a year. So we had a couple of those come in this month that really helped us. And we're now only about 1,200 behind for the year, versus about 20,000. So we made big progress. Now we just got to keep it up, kind of, so to speak. But anyway, so that was great news. We were looking at, you know, I see Allie here. I wonder if we could make a spot for her with her wheelchair. We could have got a little more squeeze than what we need to. And you guys go. Stephanie, you relocate over here, because that would be a good spot for her, I think. Thank you. Oh, yes, thank you. We got a spot for Allie right there. Can you move that chair? And yeah, just right there. Perfect. Good to see you, Allie. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Steph. All right. Perfecto. So, yeah, I think with that, now we just got to start gearing up for Rally Day in September. I'm sure enjoying this nice Washington weather, soaking it in, getting a little breather here. All right, so I think anything else from you guys? Any questions, comments? Oregon is still slated to be here like the 20th or 21st of August. So we're not doing the, big concert though for a month or so, just so that, we can get all the bugs worked out and all of that. Oh, we also are, and I can share with you that we are having, Justin's starting a concert series one Friday each month. And the first one I think is in September is cellist, renowned cellist. And then we're going to, of course, do an organ concert. I think that would be the first one in October, and then we have others lined up. And so we're hoping to have like a potluck and then a concert on Friday nights, once a month.
That's
yes.
what I was going to mention.
Yes.
Potluck, it's going to be from 6 to 7. And then 7 starts the show.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah. Love it. So I'm excited for that. That'll be a neat addition. Okay. That is enough current events. And
it's free.
And it's free. And I think, and the quality is going to be really, really top notch. So except for when Pastor Bill gives. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding. I'm not going to be a feature. Okay. We left off with a bunch of kids being born. And so with that, let me say a prayer and we'll get rolling. We're about at Genesis 30. We'll say we're going to pick up at 22. So but let's pray and ask the Spirit to be with us. Gracious and loving God, we give thanks that as we read your word together, you promise that you are with us. So let your word do its work. Give us your Holy Spirit, indeed, that we encounter you in this amazing story in Genesis. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. All right. So where to start? Well, let's start up at 19. And we read some of this last week, but just to set the context. And Leah conceived again. So remember that we've got Leah and Rachel both, not being able to have kids and then being able to have kids, and some jealousy and whatnot between the two. And then they both are miraculously given the ability to have a child, but then they also, just like their mother before them, took matters in their own hands and gave their maidservants to, and so the 12 tribes all get kind of born into existence. Surely the part of this Genesis story is to let these tribes of people know, hundreds and hundreds of years later, of course, where they come from. But there's way more to it than that, obviously. So if we pick up here at 19, and Leah conceived again, and she bore Jacob a 6th son, rather important son. Then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons. So remember how Leah is just wanting to have, her husband's love, but it just isn't quite there. So she's, now I've given him 6 sons. Surely he's going to do that. And we hear the birth of Dinah, which of course will become important later on. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. And she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, may the Lord add to me another son. Then we worked on Jacob's, what's going on for Jacob now? And we get to Jacob's prosperity. But it just occurs to me that I also said I wanted to talk about a theme that we kind of skipped over in the prior two chapters. So we'll just hold the story there and pause and do a little footnote here. So remember back, Esau went and took a wife from a group of folks that God said, I don't want you to do that. The Hittites, right. And we're going to start getting this tension between God's group that he's blessed and chosen and these other groups. And the warning not to, for lack of a better word, intermingle. And typically we would say the concern about this is that because these people worship other gods and have other values and whatnot, that it's going to kind of water down or change or, you know, for again, lack of a better word, corrupt the view that Yahweh is trying to put forward here. And this is a tension that will now run all throughout the Old Testament and go right into the New Testament. What's Jesus's primary challenge? He eats with tax collectors and sinners. He is championing that Gentiles are part of this kingdom of God, which is a non-starter for a lot of Jewish people. So it continues to go. Let's just think about how it weaves through the Old Testament. You see that once Israel comes back into the land, they've got all these fights with the Canaanite gods and that are fertility gods called Baals and Asherah and Baal. And the big preeminent story comes from Kings, where Elijah has a big battle with Jezebel. You remember Jezebel and Ahaz? Ahaz is the northern king. This is after the two kingdoms have split up. And he marries Jezebel, marries, you know, a wife of that's a Canaanite and worships the Baals and stuff. Not supposed to do that, but he did it. And so you get this war between the Canaanite understanding of God and gods and the monotheistic, if you will, belief in God. And Elijah says, you know, they have this big duel. We looked at this in our pre-Israel trip because one of the first places you go is Mount Carmel, where this battle is held. And, you know, it's like a duel at the OK Corral. And of course, Elijah wins in this duel and puts to death all the prophets of Baal, and the prophets of Baal and the Baals, the fertility gods, are shown to be powerless. Let's put it that way. And you know, so there's a phrase in there: how long will you go limping after two gods or two directions? You know, you're being torn. You can't have your cake and eat it too, as my mom would say. I don't know why. I don't know where that phrase came from. If you have cake, why wouldn't you eat it? You know, I mean, but I've never understood that idiom. But nonetheless, I know what it means. You know, you can't. Sometimes you have to choose. You can't have it both ways. And when it comes to the Old Testament and the worship of God, what's the first commandment? No other God. No other God, right there. Yes, perfect, Allie. So, so there's a tension though, isn't there? Because what's the blessing of Abraham and Sarah? What's the covenant God made with them? What's going to happen through them? All nations shall be blessed through you. So even though there's this clear direction in many times where God says, don't intermingle with these other folks, and even in the holy war stuff, it's like you're wiping out some of these groups. The mission is still to them. So you see the tension that I'm kind of trying to develop here? It's like they're our mission field, but yet we got to be careful not to be too led astray. I think this is something that we live with today. How much of our culture, we can't be separate completely, otherwise they're not our mission. How much do we, you know, do you go to the Taylor Swift concert? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna throw that in there. So and there's different times where it seems like Scripture says different things. Like remember when the people came back from exile, what did Ezra and Nehemiah say? If you have a foreign wife, what are you supposed to do? Divorce. You gotta clean things up, purify things. You put away these foreign wives. And yet, in other places like Isaiah, the vision is that all people are going to come. And so there is this tension. And we see that here in Genesis when we start hearing, don't marry this group of people, this type of thing. I don't have an exact answer for that, but one really great book, and although it's criticized today, I think, but it laid out the different ways Christians interact with their culture. And it's called Christ and Culture by Niebuhr is the author, famous author. There's two brothers that both were famous authors. This is probably the lesser famous one. And it's called Christ and Culture, and it's a tough read, but he lays out Christ and culture, Christ or culture, Christ against culture, Christ and culture in paradox, in paradox. It's like the two kingdoms stuff that we talk about in Lutheran circles. To talk about how Christians have interacted with their culture. I grew up. And so this is more of where I'm going. I grew up in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, as perhaps probably all of you know. And I grew up in the more liberal part of the Missouri Synod Church, which is way more conservative than, of course, the ELCA is. But nonetheless, it was maybe a more moderate voice in the Missouri Church. And what they accuse us of, not just as the ELCA, because of course our church is, different than the church-wide expression in many respects, but nonetheless, we celebrate the ordination of women and the leadership of women, and that women can have a call to preach the word, just like men can. They call that syncretism. You are merging the faith with the culture. You're not, it says clearly in the Bible. And what's happening to you guys is you're letting the culture dictate what you're doing and not opposite. Now, I could obviously I could debate that rather vigorously. But maybe for some, that's why they do support women in ministry, because, well, that's what our culture is. So why would we not? That's not a good reason to do it. I think you can make a strong case, obviously, for that, right from the pages of the New Testament and Old Testament. But nonetheless, that's the criticism, is syncretism. And so I bring this up just because it's an important thread that we need to be aware of as we read through the rest of Genesis. As God zeroes in, if you will, on a certain people. to bless them so they'll bless the rest of the world. And there is this tension, so much to the point where, as we talked about, Jesus comes along and he gets in big trouble the moment he starts talking about Gentiles being a part. You know, that's where he gets in trouble for eating with sinners, because those are Gentiles, but other people, Jewish people even, who are not, you know, righteous people in their minds. But he especially gets in trouble when he reminds the Jewish people that, you know, you were not chosen just for you. You were chosen to be a blessing to all nations. And that's when the gloves come on. So I don't have a solution for this tension, unfortunately, but I think it's really important to be aware of that. Here's another example of how this pans out in our current culture. Some of our evangelical brothers and sisters, as they're called today, we were the first evangelical. But the non-denomination, I mean, pretty much, you do know that all non-denomination churches are either Baptist or Reformed. What doesn't matter what they put on their sign. that's what they are. So, and I don't say it as a criticism. I just say that, you know, that's important for you to know. I suppose you could throw on another category of Pentecostals, but they simply have a different view of how the Holy Spirit works apart from baptism. But still, it's very similar. So these churches today are known for being what? Christ against culture. Don't listen to culture. Southern Baptist Convention just kicked out Rick Warren's huge Saddleback church because they have women pastors. So, you know, the Southern Baptist Convention, you know, we're holding true to the scriptures. We're against culture. Now, I don't know what the worship looks like in most Southern Baptist churches, but I know what worship looks like in most evangelical churches. And I don't say this as a nose in the air, you know. I just say, let's just be real. They have completely accommodated the culture with their worship. 100%. Come on, you come in. You don't have just a screen up there. You think we're radical here. Yeah. The whole backdrop is a screen. They love to take over movie theaters, like has happened, because it's perfect for how they do worship. It's very entertaining. You've got your Starbucks in the lobby. You got this and that, and then you have this really super great worship band that's like a concert. Really, you're going to a concert. And again, I'm not saying people aren't worshiping, because I've been there and I see them and they're worshiping, and thanks be to God. And then hopefully the pastor preaches the gospel, but more often than not, it's more self-help Christian work, teaching, which again, there's a place for that. But it's very simple, it's very user-friendly, boom. So these churches are known for being against the culture, and yet their worship is completely an accommodation to culture. Where we are criticized for following the culture, and yet our worship is the way Christians have been worshiping for, I don't know, for sure, at least 1,600 years, probably, 1,800 years. We can go back. So you see what I'm saying, how this works? And again, we have to pick our battles, and we live in this tension, and it's never going to go away. I like that, but that thread is there as we read through Genesis. And I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because I didn't want to miss that opportunity. Okay, that was quite a long deal. Any responses, any reactions, buts, or, yes,
I think we are following the culture too in our church. I've noticed the change.
Yeah,
I've been here 35 years.
Yeah. Like music style?
Music.
Yeah.
The screens up above.
Yes.
All of that.
Yes.
I'm sick of it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
But we still worship, you know, we went, when we were in Arizona, we went to a big church, huge church, like.
Yeah.
And you walk in and you pick up your little thing of communion.
Yeah.
And the peel back one.
Yeah.
We used to have. And you sit down. And then you stand up for 3 songs or whatever. And they did communion, but there was really no explanation of what it was all about. And I came out of that service, the sermon was pretty good, but I came out of there not feeling like I had worship.
Yeah.
And when we came back home and came to church here, you always say, you know, God's the only audience.
Right.
You know, worship. And that, there's such a big difference, really. And it's so meaningful to come to church and worship.
Yeah. Yeah. So 2 things in what you said, and then a comment also with what Joyce meant. Thank you, Karen. Non-denominations churches believe differently than they don't believe the Lord's Supper is a sacrament. So they're not going to say in the night in which Jesus betrayed, Jesus took bread, because they don't want you to think something is happening. It's just a memorial. So remembrance. There's nothing is going on. So that's why they do it that way, because it reflects what they believe, just like we do. Oftentimes people who are used to the liturgical service and not being an audience, but being a participant, go, something just didn't happen for me. Now, that's not true for other people, because they're participating and they're used to that or whatever. So they often feel that way about our service. It was so heady. I didn't understand it. Sitting down, standing up, this and that. It wasn't emotional. Because those churches are designed to create an emotional experience. So yes, and again, I try and be careful because I don't want to be judgy, you know, but I also want to point out that there's different ways of coming at this cultural question. So therefore, to Joyce's comment, we have screens now. That's a cultural accommodation, no doubt. We also we've had printed bulletins. Yeah. For years. That's a cultural accommodation, because people couldn't figure out where to find in the hymnal, because we're trying to make guests feel more welcome. So our question is, how much do we change versus how much do we stick true? Same with musical preferences. You know, like the music we sang last Sunday, you know, is a perfect example. I had people beaming last Sunday. Loved it. I had people. They just give me the look. You know, so music is itself a cultural creation. You know that European organ music is not what they were singing in Jesus's day.
Oh, really?
They were singing Jewish chant. Yeah. We know what they were singing in some cases. In fact, a lot of Jewish scholars are trying to recover David's music because there's musical signs and stuff. But it wasn't, they didn't have organs, of course, and stuff like that. So my point is not that one's good or bad. My point is, if you go to Africa, you know, it's the drum. Because that's their music. That's their culture. And so they clothe the gospel with, so there is this interaction between Christ and culture. And sometimes we have to be careful because the culture can take away from the gospel. But at the same time, you can't not, you know, be part of that culture because you're preaching to that culture. And so it's really interesting. I think, Ali, you had a comment, but real quick, the other thing that I think of is a book I read about the missionary movement to the Maasai in Africa, which of course span most of the continent. depending on what country, you know, it's so, but also another scholar who made the point that everywhere Christianity went in Africa, and it was allowed to just take the core gospel, Jesus's life, death, and resurrection, Jesus is God, you know, Nicene Creed kind of stuff, and then put the clothes on it. It stayed strong, and Islam hasn't gotten anywhere. But everywhere it was clearly just a part of colonialization, where we're going to implant, you know, European culture and everything, Islam has taken over, which is really fascinating. But nonetheless, you know, I can say there's places in South America and Central America and Mexico where they have clothed, you know, Christianity. The Catholic Church has allowed a lot of the prior religious stuff to come in. I get uncomfortable. Some of it, to me, contradicts, but that's easy for me to say, even while I don't notice the ways that my culture is, you know. So it's a tension, it's a struggle, and it's right there on the pages of what we're reading. So yeah. All right, others. I see some things percolating. Yeah, Kim.
Well, I mean, I think even language, you know, we as, I mean, I think I look around, we're all, you know, white middle class people living in the United States, and we read these words that are translated from Hebrew and Greek into whatever version of the Bible we have, and it means just from a perspective of language, it means something culturally to us.
Yeah.
That is probably in a lot of cases different from what it meant when it was written. And so, I mean, it's a lot deeper than just what
music you play.
What music you play.
Yeah.
So.
And that is a great point. And that is the challenge of translators as they translate something from another language to try and communicate that.
Like the early Asian translations.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read any of those, but they put like Jesus is, you know, bringer of divine light or something like that, you know, and they enculturate it into a concept that, you know, they were Confucian or whatever they had at the time, but it landed and it stuck, like you're saying, a lot more than Islam. You have to read the Quran in Arabic.
Yes, that's right. There is no translation of the Quran.
I mean,
you have to learn Arabic if you want to read the Bible. Yeah. And and that's a great point. And so here's I had somebody come, it's like, how do you know? It's like, here's the really exciting thing is our faith is not simply a rule book. There's plenty of rules there. It is a message about God and what God has done. And that can be translated, because you can translate the general meaning, and that's why Christianity has worked. How many translations are there in the world? Hundreds, because there's hundreds of languages. And it gets successfully translated most of the time, because the details may be difficult, but there's a core gospel that can be translated, versus Islam, for instance, that, you have to kind of take over, really. And unfortunately, Christianity has thought that was what is necessary too. But, I've always said that wasn't really Christianity. That was nations and empires, using Christianity. But please.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, Catholicism is a good example, because they took, after the Council of Trent, they took the Latin Bible as their only source, and so a lot of their doctrine comes out of. Jerome translated some of those words, which are pretty different from. And that's what Luther's whole thing was, is let's get back to the.
That's right. Language. That's right. The Reformation is founded on really faulty translation of Jerome of Greek into Latin.
So he did two things. He got back to the original language, and he still enculturated it into the language of the German people.
Yeah, he's known for, people always say, well, Luther wrote the German translation of the Bible. Not so. There were translations of the Bible in German, but he wrote in the vernacular. And in essence, by doing so, a lot of Germans today, even though they reject the religious claims, they could care less about that. They believe that Luther created the German language that they know today, because he brought in all these dialects and made it work, you know. So the Bible is I think, you know what, the book I'm thinking of is called Translating the Message, because there's a message that can be translated, you know. So and that is going to take into account cultural dynamics, you know, and it just is. But it's not as simple as just saying, oh, you just have to take in what the culture says, because sometimes the culture contradicts the gospel. Here's a good example. Karl Broughton, a famous systematic theologian, he's the main editor of the 2-volume systematics that probably every Marietta school had the text as she was going to school. Certainly was around when I went to school. But anyway, his parents were missionaries in Madagascar. And the I guess you say Malagasy people worshiped their ancestors. They had to do certain, you know, it's kind of like I guess a little bit like in Japan or other places where you have to do certain things, and there's some of that in Mexico too. You have to do certain things to appease and make sure your ancestors are happy. Otherwise, you're in trouble. And the missionaries came and said, you don't have to do that. That, you know, they're in God's hands one way or another. That's just another law. You believe in Jesus and you're right. You're good. Well, so now one might say, well, that was doing violence to the Madagascar culture. No, it was setting them free from something that was enslaving them. But today, many people would say, oh, that was horribly wrong. But no, it set them free from the law of having to appease their ancestor. You know, being worried every moment. Oh, something bad's happening to me. They must not be happy with me. You know, this type of thing. I don't think that's disrespectful, but so sometimes Christ is going to come and transform the culture. You know, so again, we're playing with this lovely dance that we do. And we can't escape it. Unless you want to be like, I don't know, the Hutterites or, you know, that's one way to deal with culture. Set up the walls and, you know.
And your congregation gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right.
Because you got to have something to welcome people in to make them feel welcome.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Yeah, and that's the tension right there. I mean, that's what we deal with here. How much of our worship service do we change so that when somebody comes, it isn't so foreign that they just walk out? You know? How do we do it? And this is the challenge. This is the challenge. Without also surrendering who we are, you know? So, and some churches, they call them seeker churches, even different than some, you know, Baptist or other evangelical churches. They design Sunday to be completely for the guests. And then they have something in midweek for the people that have been around, because they're just trying to get people in, you know. But that's one extreme. But at the end, we can't on the other extreme say, no, we're being true to who we are, and well, if people don't like it, you know, that's the balance. Yeah. All right. Thank you for indulging me in that conversation. But that's certainly there. Going right back from the beginning. Separate. Don't separate. You know, Paul in 1 Corinthians, by the way, says, hey, if you're married to a non-believer, stay married. He said that. So here, don't separate. All right, enough of that. Jacob's prosperity, verse 25. As soon as Rachel had borne Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me away, that I may go to my own home and country. All right, so now he's got all these kids. 11, right? Benjamin hasn't been born yet. Think. And we got Joseph, who, you know, of course, will become front and center here soon. But what has it been, 14 years? Yeah, at least. So it's been a long time. He's got, he's like 2 of Laban's daughters are his wives, and things have prospered. And so now, we've got Jacob saying, hey, it's time for me to go. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, that I may go, for you know the service that I have given you. He made a deal, right? And he delivered. Well, let's see what Laban is really about. But Laban said to him, if I've found favor in your sight, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Now, this is quite something. I thought divination was bad. It is. It is forbidden in the, legal Levitical code of the Bible. And of course, who's the famous person that did that and got in trouble? The first king of Israel. No, Saul. That's right. Remember Saul? Oh, he went to a medium. This is kind of the thing. Now, this is a term in Hebrew that could be, you might translate it like, I looked around, obviously God has blessed me while you're here. Correlation doesn't always prove causation, but ever since you've been here, things have been great. But perhaps he did consult someone or some, omen. It's kind of the omen type of an idea. I've learned by omen that God has blessed me because of you. Now, Laban should have known that without this, and the text doesn't say good or bad, but it's kind of implied this is not, he's missing something here. He should be grateful. Well, let's see if he is. Name your wages and I will give it. So notice wages. So what does Jacob say up here? He says, send me away that I'm going to give me my wives and my children to serve you, that I may go, for you know the service that I've given you. So Jacob did what he was supposed to do, right? And now Laban expects some more. Oh, you can go, but name your wages. All right, now remember who Jacob, what does his name mean again? Trickster. Okay. Didn't we say what goes around comes around? Well, let's see. Laban said, name your wages. Jacob said to him, you yourself know how I have served you and how your livestock has fared with me. In other words, Jacob is saying, you need wages? Look around, dude. Look around. For you had little before I came. Uh-oh. That's stepping on pride, isn't it? You didn't have much before. What do you mean?
He didn't have much.
He didn't, but people don't like to hear the truth, do they? I don't. Sometimes. When it involves my fault. And it has increased abundantly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I turn. In other words, wherever he turned, Laban has, been the recipient of the flow over of Jacob, the blessing to Jacob. But now, when shall I provide for my own household also? In other words, it's kind of like everything I have is yours, Laban. You're prospered. Now what I need to start taking care of my household. He said, what shall I give you? So Jacob says, okay, what shall I give you? Jacob said, you shall not give me anything.
Pastor Bill.
Yes.
Isn't it Laban saying what shall
this is the weird thing.
I think it's Laban.
Yes.
Jacob.
Yes, that's correct. So whenever I turn, but now, and the reason we get that is Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. So even though Laban's asking for wages, No, Jacob is asking, no, Laban wants up here wages, doesn't he? Name your wages.
He's saying to Jacob, name and I will pay you to stay.
Yeah. And is he saying different here now? Who's?
I thought you were saying something.
Okay. I think I just misspoke and you're correcting me, so thank you. He, as in Laban,
Yeah.
thank you, said, what shall I give you? Jacob said, you shall not give me anything. Now, just to clarify this in my mind, who asked for wages? Jacob asked?
Nobody. Laban said.
Verse 8, name your wages and I will give it.
That is Laban asking Jacob, how much can I pay you to stay?
Yeah.
Jacob asked to leave.
Jacob asked to leave and Laban wants wages. I got it. So Laban wants.
You say to know how much.
Laban to stay?
Yeah. Yeah. That's his please. Please,
Okay.
there's no note on that either.
There's no notes. No. I apologize for throwing confusion.
Back to seminary.
Back. I'm clearly in error, so help me get completely fixed. So when back to seminary. So Jacob says, I want to go. And Laban says, name your wages.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I got it. What? Is he saying, name your wages for you to be able to go? Or Jacob asked for to go. And then Laban asked for wages.
If I find favor in your eyes, please stay. Laban's asking him to stay.
Saw the difference. Thank you. That's where I've gone astray. So Laban wants him to stay, even though he said go.
If he'll stay.
So you're feeling that I'm gonna pay to stay. So Jacob then says, give me anything. You shall not give me. Right. Laban is asking him to stay, and Jacob says, you shall not give me anything. If you do this for me, I will again pasture your flock and keep it. Let me pass through all your flock today, removing from it every speckled and spotted sheep and every black lamb, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be in order to stay.
No.
In order to go. Okay, I just said in order to stay, and everybody. I'm with you.
So that you can take them leaves.
Okay.
The ugly.
Okay. So this is what, let me say it this way, and I apologize, I'm sure this is frustrating. Let me say it this way. So what you're saying to me is that Jacob is asking to do this as his, Doug, go ahead, as his wages.
Is
For having.
yeah. 15 years.
For this is the way you're gonna pay me for working so that I can
Leave.
leave. Thank you. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay,
So when you get this valid, because otherwise they take.
okay, so he's asking. He's asking, what can I give you to keep you here? Okay, so they're asking for different things. All right, we are on one accord. Yeah.
First, he says, It says, give me my wife. Jacob served the contractor 14 years for the bride price. So the women are rightfully his wives. So that's what that working for him was all about, to get his wives, which was,
Yeah. He wanted to marry Rachel,
he was.
remember?
I remember that. I thought he already paid Laban everything, but, or,
Oh,
yeah, I did too. That's right. Okay, all right. But Laban wants more. I think this.
No,
Stay.
Daughters, it says if you stay longer, so he's gonna give you wages.
Yeah, he wants him to stay, so Laban's gonna pay him to stay. Right? Let's see how it goes. Everyone that is not speckled, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and black among the lambs, if found with me, shall be counted stolen. Laban, yeah. Laban said, be as you have said. So the agreement is Jacob gets these spotted, speckled livestock, and Laban gets the others.
Perfect.
That's the perfect one. Okay.
Laban does.
But this day Laban removed the male goats that were striped and spotted, and all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, every one that had white on it, and every lamb that was black, and put them in charge of his sons. And put them in the charge of his sons. That would not, obviously, I understand that I misspoke there. And he set a distance of 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob pastured the rest of Laban's flock. So what's he doing here? He's making sure that there's not going to be any speckled stripe.
Any intermingling.
Yeah.
And any intermingling. Thank you, Ross. There we go. So Laban's doing a little trickery. More to follow. Then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar and among the plane trees and almond. I guess I do need to get more used to these. And peeled white streaks in them, exposing the white of the sticks. He set the sticks that he had peeled in front of the flocks in the troughs, that is, the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of the sticks. And so the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. I didn't know that could happen, but some animal husbandry going on here, okay? And Jacob separated the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put his own droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, that they might breed among the sticks. So evidently these sticks, they were eating them, and it could cause, what, do we have some help from your Bibles on this, Kathy?
Notice some scheme work, but only because of God's intervention.
Yeah. Hey, I don't think this would actually work if you tried this today.
Jacob admits God has taken away your mother's livestock and it's given.
Yeah. So the fact that this worked was God's intervention. I would have to agree with that, but of course, now breeding the strong instead of the weak, that's something that would still work. But for the feeble of the flock, he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Thus the man increased greatly and had large flocks, female servants and male servants and camels and donkeys. So Laban's trick did not work.
But Jacob's did.
And Jacob's did. Jacob's did,
What is?
which God seems to bless.
It just reminds me of, you know, the wars between the drug runners and so forth,
Yeah.
you know, and they are warring against each other. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what the.
Yeah, you got a real battle here.
Yeah.
You got a real battle of self-interest,
Mhm.
at least at this point.
No kidding.
Interesting. So I'm still not sure about,
Father.
at this point, Jacob's motives. Maybe you could say, go ahead, they were honest. Because he's done what he was supposed to do, and he knows he's being tricked, so he tricks him back. Yeah. Kathy?
Discussion about the wages and all that kind of stuff, verse 30 shed some light on it. Jacob's worried about what, I do something for that school, and that's what's not.
He's taking care of his household. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Abraham didn't want to be given anything.
Right. Yeah. So I think it would be safe to say then that Jacob wants to go. He's done everything he's supposed to do. Laban wants to pay him to stay. Jacob says, I'm not going to do that. And then Laban comes up with this other scheme to, in essence, keep him there as well. So maybe one lesson for us to learn is what happens when you want to hoard God's blessing. Going back to our prior conversation, Laban is going to keep it because he knows he's being blessed. He's going to keep Jacob at all costs. It doesn't go well. Yeah. All right. So now Jacob's got to go. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's, he has gained all this wealth. So they're accusing Jacob of stealing. You know, that's the next step. So Laban tries to keep him around by paying him, and then by tricking him. And now, if that doesn't work, make him a villain. Make him a villain. So now the sons are saying, you know, he's a thief. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. So now he sees that Laban is soured. And that's what happens with the presumption of righteousness. When you don't get your way, the other person is always at fault. And it blinds you to your role in the situation. I've kind of seen this a lot in families. Seen it a lot. I've seen it in sometimes, unfortunately, in marriages. It's all their fault. It's all their fault.
Yeah, but I did it because.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah, that too. And I always try and start by having each person talk about how they've contributed to the problem. Ooh.
Well, not me.
Yeah, that's the challenge. That's the challenge. And it's not like I'm being judgmental. That's just being human. Look at this. This is what happens. You know, when you have that presumption of righteousness. Now every situation is different. So I'm not honing in on anybody's specific reality in any of those things. But I do know that the first step to resolving a conflict is not to talk about how the other person is causing the problem, but how you are. Yes.
It's really interesting how this details of this inner family stuff.
Yeah.
Ended up in scripture.
Yes, the details of this inner family stuff. This is God at work through all this family business. You remind me, Bill, of in Luke 15, where Jesus tells three parables: the lost coin, and then the lost son, which we call the parable of the prodigal son. But we forget that the prodigal son story was told about in response to people being upset that Jesus was preaching the kingdom and eating among sinners and tax collectors. So he tells a story about a family that's really messed up.
Yeah.
And I had one pastor who grew up in a very dysfunctional family, and he said, Bill, I take great comfort in that. If Jesus could bring in that dysfunctional family, he can embrace us too. And I thought that was cool. Same way here, look, God's at work in the midst of all this disagreement and conflict. We typically think God's right, not causing it, but that doesn't, God is not,
But if, Laban did not honor his word. He gave the word that, yes, you can. So he was the one that broke the word first. And so now, it's like, okay, I'm going to get back at you, which is so.
Yeah. And then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. In other words, yes, you got to go because it's going to be best. He was told to go there, and now he's told, get out. Yeah. Exactly. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field where his flock was and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before. And we still use that term, falling out of favor.
Yeah. It all kind of reminds me a little bit of the old Westerns where the good guys wore white hats and the bad guys. I think in these stories, they're wearing gray.
Yeah. Life is not a melodrama. I think this, but I agree with, I agree with the thought that, sometimes there is pure evil, there's a black hat, but in general, there's a lot of gray hats. There isn't just the perfect person who's all good we're a mixed bag. Yeah. In that regard, life is not.
Which is the beauty of God's word, because he shows the reality.
Yeah. You saw a brown hat today? Yeah. Love it. No, I agree, Gloria. That's absolutely right. It is, that's spot on. But yes, not you, but the person before you. You are glorious, though. See how yeah. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and said, hey, I see that your father does not regard me as he did before, but God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. I think that's an idiom to say, like just a lot. But God did not permit him to harm me. So God protected me. If he said the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore spotted. And if he said the stripe shall be your wages, then all the flock bore stripe. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me.
But Jacob fixed it so that would happen.
He did.
Because apparently he knew that the sheep or whatever they were going to eat those peeled branches.
But God did it. Kim.
So I did a little study on this.
That's right. Yes.
And actually that shows that there are probably two different authors for this part. So Jacob did the work. There is an Elohistic work, and now that God is involved in dreams and such, then it's a Yahwistic.
Yeah. So Kim's referring to the document theory about the composition of Genesis coming from different streams within ancient Israel, and the Yahweh source where God is called Yahweh, and then the Elohist source where God is called God. And that I think Terence Fretheim is one of the scholars that really sees that difference is there. Brueggemann says don't push it too far. It's possible. But yeah, there does seem, regardless of that, I think, Kim, you're perfect to say there's a tension there, isn't there? Is it Jacob's doing or is it God's doing? Is it both? How's that working? So that's a beautiful comment. And please bring in more, because I know you did a lot of work on this story going forward. So that's perfect. That is perfect. Another tension, another, like, is this Jacob saying God had favor, but yet Jacob was doing lots of plans. So again, like Gloria said, God working through the schemes and all of this stuff. All right, good, excellent. Let's see. Where did I leave off? 9. God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. What is mottled? Spotted, yeah.
Irregular.
Speckled, irregular, yeah. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled, for I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. And I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. So this would be the Yahweh source.
No, this is
the Elohim source.
Because the God is Elohim.
Oh, yeah. It's not Yahweh. I am the God of Bethel.
And then Bethel is El.
Yeah. So both are talking about divine intervention. Yeah. All right, cool. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us. Wow. And he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do.
My note says, Jacob discusses the situation with his wives because legally they belong to their father's house.
Because legally they belong to the father's house?
I didn't know that women would even inherit it.
What's that?
I didn't even think women would inherit.
That's right.
Oh, but there's always a dowry.
There's a dowry, yeah. But I thought Jacob, yeah, he had to pay. He paid 7 years for each.
Yeah, but a wife should come with the
dowry of some kind. Yeah. So maybe that's what's going on. Maybe that's what they're referring to. But how does that strike you? All the wealth that has come to us from our father belongs to us and our children.
Well, it's kind of like in a marriage, a husband and wife, they don't call their bank account mine, it's ours.
Yeah, yeah. I'm completely wrong about a lot of things today, obviously. I'll just be human and say, it kind of comes off as justifying to me. Like, I'm not saying God isn't doing this, but it's like, yeah, that's right. And by the way, our dad stole it from us anyway. So even though we got it this way, it belongs to us anyway. I thought it was God's gift to them. I don't know. I'm just reading as just a human. This isn't a scholarly. I could be completely wrong. I don't know. I just that's the way it strikes me. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs. It does.
And
yes.
I didn't think so. They could be saying right there that Jacob doesn't deserve anything either. All the wealth that my father's taken belongs to us and our children.
And our children, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in one sense, it's true because without Jacob, their dad wouldn't have had anything.
Right.
Right, yeah. So I'm not saying there's obviously some truth to it. It's just the way it's. All right, so Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels. He drove away all his livestock, all his property that he had gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Padan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. So can you imagine? You know, you've seen the old stereotypical Western movies with the driving livestock, you know, and we got to drive it, get them doggies. So, but you just imagine so just imagine what this scene is, this thousands of animals and all the children and everybody going. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel, whoa, and this is where we'll end. You've got a cliffhanger. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. Oh.
Says God.
Gods, yeah.
It's God.
Yeah, so not just another household god, but gods.
And lowercase God.
And lowercase gods. Although in Hebrew it's probably just
There is a study footnote that explains what you think.
Go for it.
The household gods would be small portable idols, which Rachel probably stole because she thought they would bring her protection and blessing. Or perhaps she wanted something tangible to worship on the long journey ahead.
I see that. He stole them because he was worshiping them.
The Hebrew text here uses the term teraphim. The precise meaning of this Hebrew term is uncertain, but it seems to refer to household gods, idols or figurines, and what the NIV Study Bible said, that were thought to represent residents of the unseen spiritual world. The teraphim could have been used in household worship, which would have been idolatrous. However, it is also possible that they served other purpose that would not be thought of as idolatry. In 1 Samuel 19, we hear the term teraphim occurs without any suggestion of idolatry. That's another study Bible's, take at this. Oh, wait a minute, she stole.
Yeah. Well, she took it without permission.
Yeah.
Surely they.
Thank you. Yeah, this is part of our belongs to us too.
Just something she wanted to remember.
Yeah. So I know we're at the end of time, just trying to pick a good spot to quit to get you back here next week. I won't be so confused next week. Okay, I'll try.
Your glasses back.
I'm still going to go back and read that text. Let's see. So Laban and Jacob tricked Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he intended to flee. I think that the bringing in of the term Aramean, again, this is going to be a group of people that become this, in the future. By not telling him that he intended to flee, he fled with all that he had and arose and crossed the Euphrates, or just river, and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him for 7 days and followed close after him into the hill country of Gilead. So Laban is not going to let this happen. He's not going to go easy. So he's going out with all of his folks. So you get the picture here. Jacob is driving his people, and here comes Laban back here. This is going to set us up for next week. Perfect.
Laban was only gone 3 days, and it took them 7 days to catch up with the 3 days.
Yeah, 7 days it takes, I guess they're moving pretty quickly. But God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream by night. So God comes and it tries and intervenes with Laban. Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. And then Laban overtakes Jacob. And that's where we'll leave off for next week. You can go on and read at home. All right, this has been fascinating, fantastic stuff. And look forward to next week. All right. Go in peace, serve the Lord. You are welcome, Allie.
Yeah. Lots of experience.
You don't.